unpacking and analysis for you now. And in fact, let's start right here in studio, and we have Colin on the business set with a special guest. Colin?
Well, thank you very much, Peter. A very smart move there by Manalisi, trying to exonerate himself from the sin taxes and complaining only about the fuel price and leaving all the burden of the sin taxes to Nompu and Bulelani. Great work indeed. Well, we joined in the studio by Maura Feddersen, who is an economist with PwC Strategy, to talk about her impressions on the budget. Thank you very much for waiting with us until this time. What did you think?
Well, it was a very difficult balance to strike today, making sure that there were key measures to ensure we would be on a path of fiscal consolidation, especially in regard to the state-owned enterprises and Eskom, but also leaving something that would help to stimulate economic growth. Economic growth has been very disappointing over the last couple of years, and much higher rates will be required to make a significant dent in the unemployment problem we have.
Well, at the moment, when you look at the way he was putting it regarding revenues that are expected at 1.58 trillion rand and the spending of about 1.83 trillion rand, saying that we're actually spending more than we earn at 243 billion rand. What does this say to the government's deficit?
So the budget deficit is slightly worse than expected in October, and that was not a surprise because the economy has been under pressure. Tax revenues are disappointing this year, and they were actually revised down by another 15 billion for the current financial year. But there are also efforts to curb expenditure growth in the coming years, for example, in the area of the public sector wage bill, and that can also help to keep South Africa on a path of fiscal consolidation.
Now, the issue of fiscal consolidation should be concerning if we are only expecting the gross national debt to stabilize at 60% of GDP. And if we are borrowing 1.2 billion rand a day, this leaves much to be desired.
So the risk is that South Africa ends up spending too much on servicing its debt, which crowds out, so doesn't leave enough funding to be directed to investment initiatives or social spending, which will have a much more positive impact on the outlook for the South African economy and ordinary South Africans.
The budget burden in as far as the public wage bill is very, very concerning as well. But then looking at saving 8 billion rand for the overall budget in the next 3 years is something that would say perhaps it's just a drop in the ocean to say that some civil servants who are in the near pension age should retire early. Is that a smart move?
So it's quite a gentle initiative at this point. Currently, the public sector wage bill constitutes a third of all spending. And so to reduce these spending by 27 billion over the next 3 years is indeed not radical. It's not a significant change. However, it helps. It helps to fund, for example, the Eskom reconfiguration. And in that way, we are seeing a reallocation of funding from one area to the other. But in the end, it is Eskom's situation that needs to be resolved in the coming years. Otherwise, South Africa's fiscal position will remain under pressure.
I like the way you're using the word radical. Now, let's try and incorporate it in terms of revenue collection and to the members of the public. He actually was trying to be diplomatic when he mentioned the names of the likes of Terralikota, that they used to tell people not to pay for services during the apartheid era. Right now, they should go back to communities and encourage them to pay for these services. At the moment, municipalities are owed a lot of money by members of the general public. Hence, the municipalities also owe Eskom. Even here in Soweto, for example, the 7 billion rand that was mentioned. What do you make out of that?
So this is a topic that has certainly emerged strongly this year, both in the State of the Nation address by President Ramaphosa, as well as again today, that there's a culture of non-payment, and this has to stop, because otherwise Eskom will not achieve profitability, and in the end that starts to impact the entire country and all South Africans.
Well, at the moment, when you look at infrastructure spend, we seem to be having the private sector constructing more buildings in Sandton. And I was speaking to my learned friend earlier about how infrastructure development in the private sector tends to create jobs that are temporary for construction workers. And the people who are occupying those buildings are those who are graduates, who are certificated, and who are having qualifications that are perhaps on middle entry level. What do you make about how the construction sector is really speaking into the growth path that President Ramaphosa is envisaging to have?
So in terms of making sure that the economy becomes more inclusive, it is important that it becomes easier for entrepreneurs and small business owners to enter the formal economy. And here it helps to reduce the burden of regulation, making it very easy, for example, to register your business and to start trading. That also, of course, widens the tax base. So there are several positive consequences from making sure that the economy is easier to access for people who have previously been excluded. Furthermore, if we look at the infrastructure spending by government, there is certainly an opportunity to make sure that it is particularly developmental in nature and particularly positive for job creation, perhaps considering how to make sure that it isn't only short-term work, but there are also prospects then to stay employed thereafter.
All right, let's now go back to our limping state-owned enterprises. He says that we must tighten the guarantee rules. So every time when the SOEs apply for a guarantee, there must be a process in place, unlike before, where it was just like a walk in the park to apply for a bailout from Treasury, and it would be approved the next financial year, and the money goes back, and it's unaccounted for, and it became a vicious cycle.
Perhaps it's surprising that that was not always in place. And so it is absolutely the right move to become increasingly stringent with how those guarantees are being handed out, because it does compromise South Africa's fiscal position. It is something that credit rating agencies are looking at, and Moody's in particular would be watching this budget speech to see whether the bailout of Eskom would be credit neutral, because there are also other savings measures being implemented, or whether it would be credit negative, in which case South Africa's credit rating would be under threat.
Maura, here's something that's been confusing since the word, the work of stabilizing an SOE. You have to appoint the chief reorganization officer. That process, tell me, how does it unfold? Because to compare it to when municipalities are underperforming, government would take over, or if a bank is having financial problems in terms of corporate governance issues, they would appoint a curator. How does it compare to reorganizations officer?
Well, that remains to be seen, perhaps exactly what it means and how it will pan out. But perhaps the signal is that there will be an emphasis on making sure that these struggling SOEs will be reorganized. A key measure will have to be ensuring that there's clarity on exactly what the mandate is. Is there an emphasis on the developmental perspective, or on making sure there is financial viability, or both? And who is accountable for the successes of these state-owned enterprises? So it is crucial that the management structures are put in place in a way to ensure there is accountability.
But then when we now go to the level of small businesses, he didn't say much. He only said, I quote him here, he says, we need to free our entrepreneurs from stifling regulations and complicated taxes. What do you make out of that?
That is, of course, high level. So more detail remains to be heard on that. And essentially the proof will be in the pudding. So how will these interventions be implemented? The same can be said about the electricity market reforms. Exactly what will happen and how will it play out, and how quickly will Eskom be able to get back on a path of financial sustainability. Certainly looking at entrepreneurs, Tito Mboweni emphasized that data costs must fall, and by ensuring that broadband allocation, spectrum allocation will be resolved soon, that will help data costs to come down, and essentially it brings down the cost of doing business, and it makes it easier for entrepreneurs who are just getting into the market to remain profitable.
All right, so when it comes to social spending and looking at the broader spectrum of the 900 billion rand for social development, but also looking at improving the health services and the education sector. At the moment, how do you perceive this budget? Is it really going to make any difference in this financial year?
So the budget is designed to be redistributive in nature. Almost 2/3 of the budget are being dedicated to social spending, so health, education, and social grants. So it does have the potential to do a lot, especially for lower income South Africans who are under pressure. Furthermore, there were 3 additional products that were added to the list of VAT-exempted products, different types of flour and sanitary pads. So that is also helping to ease the pressure. But on the other hand, of course, fuel prices will rise, sin taxes are also on the rise. So it is more or less a reallocation of spending as well as tax burden, which is not likely to make a significant difference for ordinary South Africans.
Yeah, illicit cigarette trading in the country has been problematic in as far as revenue collection is concerned. Yeah. The announcement that they're going to deal with the smuggling of cigarettes in the country, and I have seen in the news that as well, like the most famous alleged cigarette dealer in the country. There was a sheriff at his premises, and they were attaching some goods there, some properties there. What do you make out of this? Is this really going to help?
It's crucial. It's about, in general, reducing levels of crime and boosting confidence in the economy, making sure that this is an investor-friendly environment. So all the initiatives to reduce tax evasion as well as crime in general have a very positive impact on the perceptions of South Africa on the global stage as well.
Yeah, Maura, thank you very much for your insightful perspective on the budget today, and I believe that there are very people who are keen about the responses of what other people are going to say about the budget, and I believe that our reporter Criselda Lewis is in Johannesburg to gauge public